Far back in time, more than 70,000 years ago, the first groups of modern humans begin to leave Africa. The continent that has shaped them for hundreds of thousands of years still holds most of their kin. Yet, some small bands move outward, walking into landscapes that none of their ancestors have seen before. The world is vast, and the conditions of the planet begin to open paths that had once been closed. The Ice Age locks immense quantities of water into glaciers far to the north. With so much of the ocean's volume frozen, sea levels drop, coastlines extend outward, bays and shallow gulfs shrink. Passages that once lay underwater now form exposed ground. At the same time, parts of northeast Africa experience shifting patterns of rain. Rivers pulse with fresh water in some regions, while deserts expand in others. The climate breathes in long cycles. This breathing of the planet quietly shapes the routes along which people can travel. The Red Sea lies ahead, stretching between Africa and Arabia. In many places it remains broad and deep, but in the far south, near the Bab al-Mandab Strait, the waters are narrower than elsewhere. At times of low sea level, islands rise from the channel, creating shorter crossings. Archaeologists and geneticists still debate whether humans crossed here deliberately with watercraft, or whether the earliest migrants moved north first, reaching Sinai and the Levant, before expanding east. Both paths may have been taken at different moments. The truth is still uncertain. What is clear is that the species is now moving. Shell beads, stone blades, and hearths in Arabia testify to their presence outside Africa before 60,000 years ago. Genetic studies of living people confirm that nearly all non-Africans today descend from a small branch of these early wanderers. The precise size of the groups is unknown. Perhaps they numbered only in the hundreds at first, yet their movements hold consequences for the entire human story. Step by step, these people follow the edges of familiar ecosystems. They remain close to coasts and rivers whenever possible. Water offers fish and shellfish, dependable food even when the land is harsh. Palm groves, mangroves, and estuaries provide shade and fruit. Tools made of stone are still carried from place to place, flaked carefully to produce sharp, cutting edges. Fire is tended, and hearths burn in temporary camps where the night grows cold. In this period, the Arabian Peninsula is not the desert it will later become. Paleo lake beds show that shallow waters dotted the land. Fossil animal tracks suggest grassy plains once stretched between dunes. Hunters could follow antelope and gazelle across these landscapes, yet droughts were also frequent, and whole valleys could dry within a few generations. These alternating conditions may have driven repeated pulses of migration, people advancing when water was plentiful, retreating or vanishing when it failed. Archaeologists at sites like Jebel Fire in the United Arab Emirates have uncovered stone tools resembling those of East Africa. Some blades are more than 100,000 years old. Whether these represent the earliest wave of modern humans, or perhaps a different lineage, remains uncertain. But they hint that the door out of Africa opened and closed more than once. Like the tides, human presence in Arabia may have surged and receded repeatedly, leaving only scattered traces. One small but striking detail comes from shell ornaments found far inland. Some beads are carried over 100 kilometers from the sea. Such objects reveal not only movement but also meaning. They suggest that symbolic behavior, the wearing or exchange of decorated items, accompanied these early journeys. The beads speak of identity, of connection, perhaps of memory. They also show that long distances were crossed intentionally. even when no practical need demanded it. Yet mysteries remain. Did these early groups survive long enough to contribute to later populations? Or did their lines vanish, leaving little trace in the genetic record? Some researchers argue that repeated dispersals out of Africa failed until one successful wave after 70,000 years ago spread widely. Others suggest that fragments of earlier groups may still live on within us, hidden in overlooked stretches of DNA. For now, the question is unresolved. On the planetary scale, the Earth is restless. Ice advances in the far north. Winds shift across the Indian Ocean. Monsoons bring rain in strong bursts, then fade away for centuries. The Sahara, at times, blooms with green grass and lakes, only to retreat into arid sand once more. Humanity moves within this rhythm, finding temporary windows of opportunity. When the climate opens a path, they take it. When it closes, they adapt, or they vanish. Imagine the horizon as they saw it. Across the strait, the mountains of Yemen rise faintly in the distance. To reach them is to step beyond the cradle of all previous generations. Behind them, in Africa, vast savannas stretch where their ancestors mastered fire and stone. Ahead, unknown lands unfold, carrying rivers, deserts, and forests that no modern human foot has yet touched. This moment, at the crossing from Africa into Arabia, may seem small compared to the later spread across Eurasia and into the far continents. Yet it marks a turning point. For the first time, Homo sapiens establishes itself outside its home continent. From this fragile beginning, new chapters of human history will unfold. The migration is not swift, it unfolds over generations. Camps rise and fall. Infants are born and grow. Fires are lit and left behind. Step by step, footprints scatter across the gravel plains. The route forward is not a single trail, but a branching network. Some groups move north along the Red Sea and into the Levant, brushing against regions once inhabited by Neanderthals. Others drift eastward across southern Arabia, where the monsoon rains create belts of vegetation. The story is not linear, but braided, like the channels of a delta. And through these channels, the human story slowly flows outward. Archaeological evidence shows that by about 65,000 years ago, people already lived far to the east of Arabia. They have reached India and beyond. This means that the earliest crossings from Africa must have occurred earlier still, giving time for slow expansion. Each campsite, each hearth, each chipped stone tool is a whisper from these journeys. Only fragments survive, scattered thinly, like stars in a vast dark sky. The expansion into Arabia does not end the bond with Africa. Genetic evidence shows that back-and-forth movement continues for millennia. The continents are not isolated worlds, but connected spaces. Populations may rise in one region and decline in another. Yet overall, the species holds on. These ancient migrants, though small in number, succeed in laying the foundation for the later spread into Asia and, ultimately, to the distant landmass of Sahul. Thus, the first shadows beyond Africa fall across the Arabian coastlines. They are fleeting, fragile, but enduring enough to matter. With each step eastward, humanity extends its reach. Oceans and deserts will not stop them. Climate will challenge them, but opportunity will call again. From these beginnings, the long road to Australia quietly begins. The Arabian Peninsula stretches outward between two great seas, the Red Sea to the west and the Arabian Sea to the east. For modern humans moving beyond Africa, this land is both a barrier and a corridor. It is harsh, but it is also a bridge toward Asia. Along its coasts, they continue their journey, finding sustenance where desert and ocean meet. At first glance, Arabia seems forbidding. Today it is known as a region of vast sand seas and barren rock. Yet in the deep past, during cycles of stronger rainfall, much of the peninsula was greener. Lakes filled basins now dry. Rivers carved paths across plains. Even in drier phases, the long shoreline offered opportunities. Here, early humans discovered that survival depended on following the edges of land and sea. The coast provided fish, shellfish, and seabirds. Turtles nested on beaches. Mangroves and palm groves grew in sheltered bays. These resources, dependable in ways the arid interior was not, allowed people to move steadily. Archaeological evidence supports this picture. Stone tools found at sites such as Dhofar in Oman and Jebel Faya in the United Arab Emirates resemble those made earlier in East Africa. They suggest continuity of technology carried across the Red Sea and adapted to new landscapes. Small groups likely traveled seasonally. They set up camps near lagoons, collected food, and moved when resources declined. Hearths left behind show ash and bone. Flaked stones lie scattered, dulled by time. These quiet traces remain as the main record of their lives. Unlike bones, tools endure for tens of thousands of years, giving modern science its clearest signals of their presence. One lesser-known discovery is the use of ochre in Arabia. Fragments of red pigment, ground into powder, have been found at several sites. Ochre may have served practical functions, such as protecting skin from the sun or treating hides, but it may also have had symbolic meaning. Body painting, decoration of objects, or ritual marking could all have been possible. Along with shell beads carried far from the coast, such finds remind us that these were not merely survival-focused wanderers. They were people with culture, expression, and identity. Still, questions remain. Were these Arabian populations permanent? Or were they only temporary, disappearing when climates shifted? Some researchers argue that Arabia acted mainly as a stepping stone towards South Asia. Others suggest that people may have lived here for long periods, forming stable communities. Ancient DNA, so valuable elsewhere, is nearly impossible to recover in Arabia's heat. Without it, certainty is elusive. On the planetary scale, the Ice Age continues. Glaciers hold vast amounts of water, lowering sea levels worldwide. The Persian Gulf, which today lies beneath shallow waters, is then a wide, fertile valley crossed by rivers. Freshwater streams feed wetlands and marshes. This Gulf oasis, as some scientists call it, may have been a refuge for human groups. Later, rising seas will drown it, hiding its history. For now, it offers pathways and shelter. Travel along the coasts is slow. Imagine the scene at dawn, the shoreline curving endlessly, waves breaking gently, seabirds circling above. Behind lies a horizon of low hills and sand. Ahead, the sea glimmers, its edge guiding the way. Movement along this border is both limit and opportunity. The ocean cannot be crossed at will, but its margin provides direction and food. Some scientists propose that the coastal highway strategy was one of the earliest large-scale human dispersal patterns. By staying close to the sea, groups minimized risk. Even when inland climates grew harsher, the shoreline remained relatively stable. Shellfish, seaweed, and fish did not vanish during droughts. In this way, the coast became a natural corridor, linking Africa to India. Yet danger was always present. Freshwater was not guaranteed. Storms could destroy camps. In some stretches, desert reached all the way to the sea, offering no refuge. To survive, groups had to move carefully, timing their journeys with the seasons. Archaeological tools raise another unresolved question. In some Arabian sites, stone artifacts appear unlike those of Africa, showing unique local features. Did migrants innovate independently, or did they encounter older human populations already living here? Fossil remains are too scarce to answer. Arabia may have hosted earlier human lineages, such as Homo erectus, but their interactions with modern humans remain mysterious. Climate shifts dictated everything. When monsoons strengthened, rain fell deep into Arabia, filling lakes and rivers. In these wet phases, human populations expanded, spreading inland. When monsoons weakened, deserts advanced, forcing people back to coasts or out of the region. Human presence here was not continuous, but pulsed, advancing and retreating in rhythm with the climate. Consider the scale of this journey. From the southern Red Sea to Oman's eastern shore is more than 1,000 kilometers. That is farther than the span from Paris to Warsaw, yet across generations it is achievable. Each camp lies only a few days' walk from the next. Over centuries, the path lengthens until coasts are dotted with people. Archaeologists believe that by 65,000 years ago, humans had already crossed Arabia into India. This means that the movement through Arabia must have begun much earlier. Sites like Jebel Fire, with tools dated to over 100,000 years ago, suggest repeated dispersals. Some waves may have failed, their people disappearing without descendants. Others succeeded, carrying humanity ever eastward. The lesser-known story of the Persian Gulf Valley adds depth. During low sea levels, rivers from Mesopotamia and Iran converged in the basin. Marshes and fertile ground stretched where saltwater now lies. It could have supported large groups for thousands of years. Some scientists suggest that myths of a drowned homeland in later cultures might echo faint memories of such vanished landscapes. But most of Arabia's past is hidden. Sites are buried by dunes or submerged beneath the sea. Each discovery, a hearth, a flake, a bead, can change the picture. Arabia remains one of the most challenging regions to study, and its role in the human journey is still being pieced together. Far beyond Arabia, other continents are also shifting. Glaciers spread in Europe. Forests advance and retreat in East Asia. Lands that will one day form the islands of Southeast Asia are still joined together in vast, low plains. Humanity's slow spread along the Arabian shore is part of this global transformation. Step by step, the species adapts to a planet in motion. By the time humans leave Arabia behind, their presence has become firmly established across South Asia. Arabia has served as both corridor and home. Fires once burned on its beaches. Beads once gleamed in its sunlight. Children once played in its lagoons. Most traces are gone now, washed away or buried. But the journey continued, eastward, toward India, toward new horizons, and eventually toward Australia. From the long shores of Arabia, the path of humanity bends eastward into the vast landscapes of South Asia. Here, modern humans step into one of the richest ecological mosaics on Earth. Forests, grasslands, and rivers stretch in every direction, shaped by the monsoon rains and the deep rhythms of the planet. These lands form a wide green crescent, bridging Arabia and the far islands of Southeast Asia. Within this crescent, people adapt, endure, and continue their slow journey. South Asia in this age is a region of contrasts. To the north rise the young Himalayas, their peaks already immense, catching snow and feeding rivers. To the south lies the Indian Ocean, its tides pulsing with the moon. Between these poles, broad river valleys cut across fertile plains. The Ganges, the Narmada, the Indus, all flow strongly in their seasons, creating corridors that guide movement. Modern humans entering this landscape encounter abundant life. Elephants, rhinoceroses, deer, and wild cattle roam the grasslands. In the forests, monkeys, birds, and insects fill the canopy with sound. Archaeological sites confirm that humans reached this region early. At Jwalapuram in Andhra Pradesh, stone tools lie buried beneath volcanic ash. The ash comes from the eruption of Mount Toba in Sumatra, one of the greatest volcanic events in the last 2 million years. The eruption, around 74,000 years ago, spread ash thousands of kilometers. It blanketed parts of India in layers several meters thick. For decades, scientists believed that this catastrophe nearly destroyed humanity, leaving only a few survivors. Yet the evidence at Jwalapuram shows continuity. Tools above and below the ash are similar. People were present before the eruption, and they remained afterward. Humanity endured. This resilience is remarkable. The skies may have darkened for years, the climate disrupted, plants and animals stressed. Yet small groups of humans adapted. They shifted diets, sought new resources, and survived. Their persistence reveals the flexibility of Homo sapiens, a species able to withstand extremes of environment. A lesser-known detail is that microscopic shards of Toba ash have been discovered even in Africa. Winds carried the debris across continents. This means that the eruption was not only a regional event but a planetary one. Its influence was global, though the severity of its impact on human populations is still debated. The very presence of stone tools beneath and above the ash in India suggests that early humans were not simply victims of catastrophe, but active survivors. Uncertainties remain. Did the eruption cause a sharp genetic bottleneck, reducing humanity to a handful of lineages? Or did populations remain more numerous than once believed, scattered in refuges across Asia and Africa? Genetic studies continue, but the picture is incomplete. Ancient DNA from this period is scarce, leaving gaps. The debate continues, and the mystery endures. On a planetary scale, South Asia is shaped by the monsoon system. Each year, winds shift across the Indian Ocean, carrying rain inland. When the monsoon is strong, rivers swell, forests flourish, and grasslands expand. When it weakens, droughts spread, lakes dry, and deserts advance. These cycles repeat over centuries and millennia, forcing humans to adapt continually. Their presence in South Asia is not a single wave, but a rhythm of persistence, expansion, and movement. Imagine the Narmada River in this age. Along its banks, groups establish camps. Fires burn at night, casting light on stone blades and wooden spears. Hunters track antelope, while gatherers dig tubers and collect fruits. Children play near the water, their footprints mixing with those of deer and wild cattle. Each morning, the river guides them forward, a path of life winding across the land. The distance covered is immense. From the western edge of Arabia to the eastern edge of India is more than 2,000 kilometers, greater than the span from Lisbon to Warsaw. Yet no single journey is so vast. Each step is small. Each generation moves a little further. Over centuries, the map of human presence expands, dot by dot, camp by camp, until the crescent of Asia is filled with traces. Archaeological discoveries also reveal innovation. In some sites, humans make microliths, very small stone blades that can be fitted into wooden shafts to create composite tools. These appear surprisingly early. Such technology suggests growing sophistication in hunting strategies. With lighter, more efficient weapons, humans can target smaller animals and diversify their diets. The presence of microliths marks the emergence of regional traditions, adapted to local environments. Still, mysteries remain about encounters with other human species. Genetic studies show that people in South Asia today carry traces of Denisovan ancestry, yet fossils of Denisovans have not been found here. Did encounters occur somewhere in South Asia or further east, with the genetic signal carried back? The evidence is absent, leaving only questions. What is certain is that the story of Homo sapiens in Asia was never solitary. Other human groups were present, and contact, whether rare or frequent, shaped the lineage of all later populations. On the planetary scale, the migration into South Asia marks an important expansion. This is no longer a narrow presence along the Red Sea or the Arabian coast. It is a spread across an entire subcontinent. By 65,000 years ago, humans occupy regions from Sri Lanka in the south to the Himalayan foothills in the north. Sites in Sri Lanka reveal hunting of monkeys and squirrels in dense tropical forests, evidence of adaptation to yet another ecological niche. This versatility is the hallmark of the species. The lesser-known detail of shell beads adds to the picture. Beads made from marine shells have been found far inland, carried over 100 kilometers from the sea. Such objects are not mere tools. They hold symbolic meaning. They speak of identity, ornament, and perhaps exchange. They reveal that even as people struggle to survive, they also express and communicate. Culture travels with them, as much as stone blades or fire. Step by step, the green crescent carries them onward. To the east lies the Bay of Bengal, its coastline far different from today. With sea levels lower, vast plains stretch outward where water now lies. Rivers flow across land long since drowned, offering fertile paths. Beyond those plains, the forests of Southeast Asia wait. By this time, humans are firmly established across South Asia. They have survived volcanic catastrophe, endured monsoon cycles, and adapted to both grassland and jungle. Their resilience proves that the journey will not stop here. From the subcontinent, the road leads further into islands, across seas, and eventually to the distant continent of Sahul. The green crescent of Asia is both homeland and passage. It is a place of settlement and a corridor of movement. In its valleys and forests, the human story gathers strength for the next great leap. The monsoon winds become the silent guides of humanity's eastward journey. Across South Asia, the rhythm of life is set not only by rivers and forests, but by the seasonal pulse of rain. Each year, warm air rising from the Indian Ocean draws moisture inland. The skies darken, storms break, and torrents of water sweep across the plains. Rivers swell, lakes fill, and grasses rise tall. Then, after months of abundance, the winds shift again. Dry air settles, streams shrink, and land cracks in the sun. This alternation of wet and dry is as old as the subcontinent itself. For early humans, it shapes both opportunity and risk. Moving along India's coasts, people learn to follow these cycles. When the rains return, food is plentiful. Fish surge upstream, herds of animals graze on new grass, and plants burst into fruit. During these months, camps can grow larger, fires burn longer, and tools are made in abundance. When the dry season arrives, groups scatter, seeking shaded refuges near rivers or highland springs. The monsoon dictates movement as surely as stars guide the night sky. Archaeological sites along the southern and eastern coasts provide evidence of this pattern. In Tamil Nadu, stone tools appear near ancient estuaries, suggesting seasonal use of rich fishing grounds. In Andhra Pradesh, the continuity of occupation at Jwalapuram shows that even through volcanic ash and climate stress, people adapted to the cycle. The tools themselves, blades, scrapers, and points, bear witness to lives lived in rhythm with the rain. One lesser-known detail comes from shell ornaments discovered far inland, more than 100 kilometers from the nearest coast. Their presence implies not only movement, but also exchange. Perhaps people carried shells as symbols of identity or as gifts between groups. Perhaps they were reminders of the sea, carried into the interior during dry seasons. Whatever their purpose, they show that the monsoon-driven mobility was not random wandering but patterned, carrying with it both resources and symbols. Still, mysteries remain. Did groups deliberately synchronize their movements with the monsoon? Or did they simply respond to necessity year after year, generation after generation, until patterns emerged unconsciously? Archaeology cannot yet answer. But the distribution of sites along river valleys and coasts suggests that people were not aimless. They knew where abundance could be found, and they returned regularly. The monsoon was not just weather. It was knowledge, memory, and tradition. On a planetary scale, these winds are part of a larger system. The Indian Ocean monsoon is tied to the circulation of heat across the globe. When glaciers expand in the north, the strength of the monsoon shifts. Rain belts move northward or southward, opening corridors in some regions, closing them in others. The very breath of the planet shapes the fate of small bands of humans. In wet centuries, populations expand, spreading into new lands. In dry centuries, they retreat, sometimes disappearing entirely from whole regions. Imagine a camp on the western coast of India at the onset of the rains. Clouds gather over the sea, lightning flashes, and the smell of wet earth rises. People gather near shelters, tending fires carefully in the damp air. Soon, rivers will flood, carrying fish in abundance. Plants long dormant will sprout. Children watch the first torrents with awe, just as their ancestors once watched the Nile flood in Africa. The rains are both familiar and new, both promise and danger. As groups expand eastward, the Bay of Bengal becomes their frontier. Here, the monsoon is especially intense. Storms sweep across the waters, reshaping coastlines. With sea levels lower than today, wide plains extend where water now lies. These plains are crossed by braided rivers, offering fertile ground for both animals and humans. Camps along these ancient river channels are now lost beneath the waves, but their memory lingers in scattered stone artifacts found on higher ground. A scale reference illustrates the distances involved. From the western shores of India to the deltas of the Bay of Bengal is more than 2,000 kilometers, as far as the span from Madrid to Warsaw. Yet across generations, these steps accumulate. Each move with the monsoon adds to the slow spread of humanity. By 65,000 years ago, humans are established across this vast arc, poised to move into Southeast Asia. Archaeological finds in Sri Lanka add another dimension here. Caves, such as Farhian Lena and Batadomba. Lena preserve evidence of early human presence. By 60,000 years ago, people occupy these shelters, using microlithic tools to hunt monkeys and squirrels in tropical forests. This shows remarkable adaptation. Instead of relying only on large game, humans diversify their diet, using advanced technology to thrive in dense rainforest. The monsoon rains, feeding the forests, make such strategies possible. Yet uncertainties remain. How did people cross the many rivers swollen by seasonal floods? Did they build simple rafts or rely on fords? No clear evidence survives, but given their later sea crossings into Southeast Asia, it is likely they already had some knowledge of watercraft. The monsoon, while offering abundance, also demanded solutions to constant flooding. Human ingenuity, quiet and persistent, met these challenges. On the planetary scale, the spread of humans across monsoon Asia reflects a larger truth. Homo sapiens is not confined to one niche. Where other species specialize, humans adapt. They hunt on plains, fish in estuaries, and forage in forests. They carry symbols and make pigments and craft tools for many purposes. The monsoon world demonstrates this versatility. One fascinating but lesser-known find is the early use of grinding stones in India. At some sites, stones show wear, suggesting the processing of plant material. This may be among the earliest evidence of humans systematically grinding seeds or tubers. Though agriculture is still tens of thousands of years away, these small experiments mark the beginnings of practices that will one day transform the planet. The mystery of symbolic life deepens as well. The shell beads, the ochre pigments, and the deliberate shaping of tools suggest that culture is traveling with these people. It is not visible in grand monuments or large settlements, but in small, portable form. Ornamentation, pigment, and memory move as surely as fire. These traces remind us that even in the age of survival, meaning was never absent. Step by step, humans follow the monsoon winds eastward. The rains carry them across India, into river valleys, and toward the Bay of Bengal. Beyond lies Southeast Asia, with its islands, forests, and seas. For now, the monsoon defines their world. Its pulse is steady, guiding life and movement, shaping not only landscapes, but also destinies. The long journey across South Asia is nearing its turning point. Soon, the challenge of open water will appear. Deep straits that cannot be forded, seas that cannot be skirted. But in this moment, as the rains fall and rivers swell, humanity thrives in the rhythm of the monsoon. The winds blow, the land breathes, and the journey continues. From the river valleys of India and the coasts of the Bay of Bengal, the human journey presses further east. Before them lies a realm of forests, deltas, and shifting shorelines, the ancient world of Sunderland. Today, much of this region lies beneath the South China Sea and the shallow waters around Indonesia. But 65,000 years ago, when sea levels were lower by more than 100 meters, Sunderland stretched as a vast landmass, linking what are now separate islands. It was a continent in its own right, green and immense, forming the next stage of humanity's migration toward Australia. The geography of Sunderland was strikingly different from today. The islands of Sumatra, Borneo, and Java were not isolated. They were joined by wide plains, threaded with rivers and covered in tropical forests. The Strait of Malacca was not a narrow sea, but a fertile valley. To the north, the Mekong and other rivers flowed across lowlands now drowned. To the south, mangroves and swamps lined the coasts. This was the edge of Asia. But in the Ice Age world, it felt like another continent altogether. For humans arriving from India, Sunderland offered both opportunity and challenge. Opportunity came in the form of abundance, forests filled with fruit, rivers teeming with fish, and herds of animals on open plains. Giant elephants known as stegodon roamed these lands. Rhinoceroses, wild cattle, and deer were plentiful. In the forests, orangutans and gibbons moved through the canopy. Birds of countless kinds filled the air. For humans skilled at adaptation, this was a land of riches. The challenges, however, were just as real. Tropical forests are dense and demanding. Food is abundant but often scattered. Dangerous predators lurk in the shadows. Tigers, leopards, and crocodiles wait along riverbanks. Insects carry disease. The climate is hot, humid, and at times overwhelming. To survive here, people needed to adjust their strategies once again. They crafted smaller or versatile tools, and they learned to exploit many food sources rather than depend on just a few. Archaeological traces in Southeast Asia show this process at work. At sites in Sumatra, stone tools more than 60,000 years old mark early human presence. In Borneo, caves such as Naya preserve evidence of occupation stretching back tens of millennia. At these sites, stone flakes, animal bones, and charred remains of plants show how people lived at the edge of Sunderland. They used fire to cook, stone blades to cut, and pigments to decorate or mark. A lesser-known detail comes from pollen analysis in sediments from this region. Studies show that during the Ice Age, Sunderland's forests expanded and contracted with the monsoon cycle. In wetter phases, dense rainforest dominated. In drier phases, open savanna spread. Humans moving through the land witnessed these shifts, responding by altering their movements and diets. The forests and plains were never static. They breathed in time with the planet's climate. One enduring mystery is how early humans first entered Sunderland. Did they move along the coastlines, following beaches and estuaries? Or did they take inland routes, following rivers into the forests? Archaeology offers clues but no certainty. Stone tools appear in both coastal and inland contexts, suggesting that people explored multiple pathways. What remains unknown is how continuous these movements were, whether Sunderland was settled quickly or only gradually over many millennia. On the planetary scale, the expansion into Sunderland marks another milestone in human dispersal. For the first time, Homo sapiens occupies lands far removed from Africa, lands separated not only by deserts, but by seas and forests. Even though Sunderland is larger in the Ice Age world than it is today, it still requires people to cross straits and rivers. Each crossing represents a leap, small in distance, but immense in significance. These leaps accumulate, carrying humanity closer to the great challenge of reaching Sahul. Imagine a scene on the northern edge of Sunderland, A group camps near a river that today lies beneath the South China Sea. Fires crackle, casting light on freshly cut bamboo. Bamboo may have been one of the most important materials here, versatile for making tools, containers, and shelters. Hunters return with small deer. Gatherers bring palm fruit and tubers. Insects buzz in the humid air. Overhead, the canopy muffles the sound of rain. Life here is rich, but it demands constant adaptation. The distances across Sunderland are immense. From Sumatra in the west to the islands near present-day New Guinea in the east is more than 3,000 kilometers, farther than the distance from London to Istanbul. Yet over generations, step by step, humans expand across it. They do not rush. Each group explores a little further, settles in a new valley, crosses a new river. The expansion is slow but steady. Archaeologists also find evidence of symbolic life here. Shell beads, ochre pigments, and even early carvings hint that culture flourished alongside survival. Humans did not abandon their symbolic practices in the dense forests. They carried them as carefully as they carried fire. In Sunderland, meaning and memory remained part of life, even when survival was difficult. Still, much is hidden. Many of the most important ancient sites now lie underwater, drowned when glaciers melted and seas rose after the Ice Age. Vast plains that once held rivers, forests, and camps are gone, buried beneath shallow seas. Only fragments remain on higher ground, in caves or sheltered valleys. This loss makes Sunderland one of the great mysteries of human prehistory. How many people lived there? How far did they spread? We may never know. The lesser-known discovery of ancient DNA in sediments has begun to open new possibilities. Even when bones are absent, soil can retain traces of genetic material. Future studies may reveal more about who these people were, how they related to other groups, and whether they carried genes from encounters with archaic humans such as Denisovans. For now, the record is silent, and questions remain unanswered. On the planetary scale, Sunderland is part of a wider transformation. As ice sheets lock water, continents expand outward, coastlines shift, and shallow seas retreat. Land bridges link islands, creating opportunities for migration. But beyond Sunderland, deep straits remain, barriers that cannot be crossed on foot. To reach Sahul, people will need to master the sea. The edge of Sunderland is thus both a threshold and a challenge. Step by step, humans push toward that edge. They follow rivers, explore valleys, and settle caves. They adapt to forests and savannas, endure monsoon cycles, and cross narrow straits. Each movement brings them closer to the unseen continent of Australia. For now, they stand on the rim of Sunderland, surrounded by forests and seas, carrying fire, tools, and memory. The next stage will demand new skills and new courage, but the journey has already carried them far. From the eastern edge of Sunderland, the land dissolves into fragments. The path ahead is no longer a broad plain, but a scattered chain of islands. Between them lie straits of open water, some narrow, others stretching for tens of kilometers. For the humans continuing eastward, this marks a turning point. To advance further, they must learn to live not only with forests and rivers, but also with the sea. Island Southeast Asia, during the Ice Age, is a dramatic landscape. Many of its islands are volcanic arcs, formed by the collision of tectonic plates. Cones rise high, often shrouded in smoke. When eruptions occur, ash darkens the sky. forests burn, rivers fill with mud. Yet in the years after, the soil becomes rich, vegetation flourishes, and animals return. Coral reefs surround the coasts, creating lagoons full of fish. Rainforests cover slopes, heavy with fruit and buzzing with insects. For humans, these islands offer both abundance and risk. Even when sea levels are 100 meters lower, deep straits remain. The Lombok Strait between Bali and Lombok is one of them. It is part of a permanent boundary called Wallace's Line, dividing Asian from Australasian species. Tigers, monkeys, and elephants exist on one side. Marsupials, cockatoos, and giant reptiles dominate on the other. No land bridge ever spans this line. To cross, humans must build watercraft. This represents one of the boldest steps in their history so far. Archaeological evidence shows that they succeeded. Fossils from Sumatra demonstrate modern human presence more than 60,000 years ago. In Sulawesi, cave sites preserve stone tools and, later, paintings made in red ochre. These finds show that people were not merely passing through. They adapted, settled, and created. The distances involved are significant. The crossing from Bali to Lombok is 20 kilometers of open sea. Others are longer. Reaching Timor requires multiple voyages, some over 50 kilometers. Such journeys cannot be explained by accidents alone. They suggest planning, cooperation, and memory of routes. Although no ancient rafts or canoes survive, the distribution of people across these islands proves that early humans were seafarers. One lesser-known clue lies in obsidian, a volcanic glass used for sharp blades. Sources of obsidian are limited, yet pieces are found on islands far from their origins. This means that groups deliberately carried materials across straits. Obsidian glints dark and green, sharper than most stone. Its movement reveals both mobility and value. Mysteries remain. What did their watercraft look like? Some imagine bamboo rafts, others dugout canoes. Storms could have swept people across channels, but the repeated success of voyages points toward intent. They likely observed tides, winds, and stars, passing knowledge between generations. Though invisible to us now, these skills were crucial. Life on the islands was diverse. People hunted pigs, deer, and birds. In caves on Timor, bones of giant rats have been found with cut marks from stone tools. These animals, weighing several kilograms, provided dependable food. Fish and shellfish were also vital, taken from reefs and lagoons. Bamboo, plentiful and versatile, was used for tools, containers, and perhaps even rafts. Other humans may have been present too. On Flores, the small-bodied Homo floresiensis had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. Fossils suggest they disappeared around the same time modern humans arrived, about 50,000 years ago. Whether they met is unknown. Genetic evidence also hints that Denisovans once lived somewhere in this region, leaving DNA traces in modern populations. But their bones have never been found here. These encounters, direct or indirect, remain among prehistory's unanswered questions. The planetary context is important. As glaciers grow in the north, seas fall, exposing more land. But the deep straits of island Southeast Asia never vanish. They remain permanent barriers. Unlike animals, which cannot cross, humans do. This single fact explains much of the later uniqueness of Australia's fauna, but also much of the boldness of human history. When nature placed limits, people overcame them. A scale reference captures the magnitude of this migration. From Sumatra in the west to Timor in the east is more than 2,000 kilometers, a distance greater than Paris to Moscow. Each step may be only a short sea crossing, but together they form one of the greatest journeys in prehistory. Over generations, families move from island to island, slowly extending the frontier of humanity. Culture crosses with them. On Sulawesi, the oldest known hand stencils and animal paintings appear at least 45,000 years ago. Red pigment blown around a hand leaves a negative image on stone, a silent mark of presence. These are among the oldest artworks on Earth. They show that symbolic expression survived the sea journey. Even while adapting to storms and volcanoes, people made art. Another lesser-known discovery involves mollusk shells found cut and pierced. Some were used as tools, others as ornaments. This continuity of symbolic practice ties the islanders back to Africa, Arabia, and India. Memory, meaning, an identity traveled alongside stone blades and fire. Step by step, humans mastered this archipelago of fire and sea. They learned to cross channels, to live on volcanic slopes, and to fish coral reefs. They carried obsidian, shells, and pigments. They adapted to climates, animals, and landscapes never before seen. Each success brought them closer to the next horizon. By 65,000 years ago, people had reached the easternmost islands. On clear days, the outline of Sahul, the combined landmass of Australia and New Guinea, could sometimes be glimpsed across the sea. The remaining crossings were longer than any before. Yet the experience gained here made them possible. The oceans were no longer just obstacles. They were part of the human world. Thus, the islands of fire and sea became a proving ground. Here, humanity demonstrated skills that would one day allow voyages across the Pacific. Here, they encountered other human species, adapted to eruptions, and turned islands into stepping stones. And here, they prepared for the greatest crossing yet, into Sahul, and into the deep story of Australia. As humans journey deeper into island Southeast Asia, they carry with them fire, tools, and memory. Yet in these lands they are not entirely alone. Genetic evidence tells us that other humans once lived here too. Mysterious relatives known today as the Denisovans. Unlike Neanderthals, whose bones and tools are found across Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans remain elusive. Their story is written mainly in DNA, preserved within the genomes of living people in Asia and Oceania. Even without abundant fossils, their traces whisper through the lineage of humanity. The name Denisovan comes from Denisova Cave in Siberia, far from the tropics of Southeast Asia. In that cave, a single finger bone, a few teeth, and fragments of bone revealed an unknown kind of human. Ancient DNA extracted from them showed that Denisovans were close relatives of Neanderthals, yet distinct. They had lived for hundreds of thousands of years across Asia. Their range was vast, perhaps stretching from the cold steppes of Siberia to the warm forests of Southeast Asia. But evidence in bones is scarce. Instead, the strongest proof comes from the genetic record of modern humans. Populations in Melanesia, New Guinea, and Australia carry a significant portion of Denisovan ancestry, up to 5% of their DNA. This means that as humans moved eastward through island Southeast Asia, they encountered Denisovans and interbred with them. These meetings may have been brief or prolonged, but they were enough to leave a lasting genetic legacy. A lesser-known detail is that certain Denisovan genes appear to help humans adapt to difficult environments. One gene variant, still found in Tibetans today, assists with high-altitude breathing by regulating oxygen use in the body. This adaptation likely came from Denisovans, showing that their contribution was not only genetic but functional. Though we cannot see their faces, their legacy lives in the breath of people walking on Himalayan plateaus. The mystery lies in where, exactly, these encounters took place. Did Denisovans live on the islands of Indonesia? Or were they encountered further north, in mainland Asia, before humans pressed onward? No Denisovan fossils have yet been found in Southeast Asia, yet the genetic evidence is strongest among island and Pacific populations. This suggests that Denisovans must have lived somewhere along the route to Sahul. On the planetary scale, their presence reminds us that Homo sapiens was never alone during its expansion. At least 4 human lineages shared the Earth at this time: Neanderthals in the west, Denisovans in the east, Homo floresiensis in Indonesia, and modern humans spreading among them. The Ice Age world was one of coexistence, overlap, and gradual absorption. Our species is the one that endured, but not without contact. Imagine a meeting in a forest valley. 2 groups encounter one another at a river crossing. They are alike in many ways, both upright, tool-using, fire-making humans, but subtle differences mark them. Denisovans may have been robust, with strong jaws and large teeth. Modern humans may have been slimmer, with slightly different tools. How they interacted is unknown. Were there conflicts, cautious exchanges, or shared lives? The fossil record is silent, leaving only the enduring evidence of children who carried mixed ancestry. Archaeological sites in Southeast Asia add indirect support. In caves such as Callao in the Philippines, bones of yet another distinct human lineage, Homo luzonensis, have been found, dating to over 50,000 years ago. Though not Denisovan, these discoveries reveal how complex the human landscape once was. It was a patchwork of species, overlapping in space and time. Within this mosaic, Denisovans may have been widespread, invisible today only because their bones are lost to heat, humidity, and time. One fascinating but little-known clue is the strength of Denisovan ancestry among indigenous Australians and Papuans. This pattern suggests that interbreeding took place before humans entered Sahul, somewhere in island Southeast Asia, perhaps on Sulawesi or the Moluccas, or the islands near New Guinea. Humans met Denisovans and lived together long enough for genes to pass. These encounters shaped all later populations of the Pacific. Still, uncertainty dominates. Some scholars argue that there may have been more than one Denisovan population. The genetic evidence points to multiple distinct lineages, not a single group. If true, Denisovans were not confined to one region, but spread across many, adapted to different environments from Siberia to the tropics. In this case, the Denisovans encountered in Southeast Asia may have looked and lived differently from those in Siberia. Their diversity adds to the mystery. On the planetary scale, these interactions illustrate how migration was never a simple replacement. Modern humans did not simply sweep aside earlier species. Instead, they absorbed them, piece by piece, through shared ancestry. Today, fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA live in billions of people worldwide. The story of humanity is not singular, but braided. A scale comparison highlights the spread. From Denisova Cave in Siberia to the islands near New Guinea is more than 6,000 kilometers, farther than the span from London to Kabul. Yet across this distance, the genetic signal of Denisovans is found. This suggests they once occupied a continental range, vast and varied. One unresolved question is cultural. Did Denisovans have symbolic traditions, art, or ornaments like those of modern humans? No clear evidence survives, yet the size of their teeth and bones suggests they were well adapted, robust, and capable of thriving in many environments. Perhaps they too painted caves, carved ornaments, or made music. But the climate of the tropics has erased the traces. In the absence of material culture, we are left with speculation. Picture again the human journey across the islands. They carry fire, beads, and obsidian blades. They cross straits in bamboo rafts. And at some point, they meet others, not animals, not strangers entirely, but humans of another kind. From these encounters, the genetic legacy continues, carried onward into Sahul. Even without fossils, the story is written in living genomes, proving that the past is never entirely lost. Step by step, the evidence grows. Ancient DNA techniques recover fragments from sediments, not only bones. Perhaps one day, soil samples from Indonesian caves will reveal Denisovan traces directly. Until then, we work with what is known, the genes in our cells and the scattered tools in the earth. By 65,000 years ago, modern humans had already mixed with Denisovans. This blending was part of their identity as they reached Australia. The peoples of Sahul carried not only their African heritage, but also the legacy of encounters in Asia. Denisovan DNA shaped their resilience, their health, and their diversity. Though the Denisovans themselves are gone, their traces endure. Thus, the islands of fire and sea were also islands of meeting. Here, modern humans proved their skill at seafaring, and here too they met ancient cousins whose memory lingers in blood. The record is incomplete, but enough remains to tell us this: the journey eastward was never solitary. It was shared, however briefly, with others whose names we now only guess. From the islands of fire and sea, the horizon shifts once more. To the east lies a barrier unlike any faced before. Deep channels of ocean separating island Southeast Asia from the great continent of Sahul. For modern humans, this step represents more than migration across land. It demands courage to sail into the unknown, to build vessels able to carry families, fire, and memory over open water. This is one of the boldest chapters of human prehistory. The geography of this region is unique. During the Ice Age, sea levels are more than 100 meters lower than today. Sunderland forms a vast landmass, and Sahul, combining Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania, is also joined. But between them lies Wallacea, a zone of scattered islands and deep straits. Even at the lowest seas, no bridge of land connects the two continents. At least 8 sea crossings, some more than 80 kilometers wide, stand between humans and Sahul. These waters must be crossed with rafts or boats. Archaeological and genetic evidence agrees, by 65,000 years ago, humans had already reached Sahul. This means that the sea voyages were not only attempted, but succeeded. Though no rafts survive, their achievement is written in the presence of people on the far continent. The fact of arrival itself is proof of seafaring skill. Imagine a shoreline at dawn, perhaps on Timor or another eastern island. A group gathers bamboo poles, tying them with strong vines. Logs are added for buoyancy. Bundles of palm leaves carry food and water. The raft is heavy, crude by later standards, but it floats. They push it into the surf, guiding it beyond the breakers. Waves lift and rock the craft. Ahead lies a horizon of blue, nothing but sea and sky. The far shore is invisible. The crossing may take days. Yet they set out, trusting in memory, stars, and courage. One lesser-known clue comes from computer models of drift. Studies show that currents in this region flow strongly from west to east, towards Sahul. This means that even rafts without sails would naturally drift in the right direction. The ocean itself helped carry humanity forward, but skill was still essential. To launch at the right place, to bring fire and tools safely, to ensure enough water and food for the voyage. Chance alone cannot explain the settlement of Sahul. Repeated crossings involving families were needed. Mysteries remain. Did these people build simple rafts? Or did they already know how to hollow out canoes? No wooden remains survive. Some scientists believe bamboo rafts were the most likely, given their buoyancy and availability. Others argue for dugout canoes carved with stone tools from large logs. Either would have been enough to cross the straits, especially with favorable winds and currents, but the exact design remains unknown. On the planetary scale, these voyages mark a turning point. Humans are no longer confined to continents and coastlines. They are now mariners. This skill will one day carry their descendants across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. The settlement of Sahul is the first great sea migration in human history, a feat unmatched until tens of thousands of years later. Consider the scale. From Timor to the nearest islands of Sahul is more than 70 kilometers of open water, farther than the distance from London to Brighton multiplied by 5. For a raft without sails, this is a formidable challenge, yet it was achieved, not once, but many times. The peoples of Australia and New Guinea today descend from those successful crossings. A lesser-known detail adds depth. The oldest sites in northern Australia, such as Madjedbebe in Arnhem Land, show human presence by 65,000 years ago. This means that the arrival was not a single accident, but a sustained settlement. Families carried stone tools, fire-making skills, and symbolic traditions across the sea. They arrived ready to live, not merely to survive. Still, many questions remain unanswered. Were these crossings organized deliberately, with knowledge of navigation passed down? Or were they exploratory, with small groups setting out without certainty of land ahead? Did they use the stars, the flight of seabirds, or the color of the sea to guide them? Archaeology cannot yet say, but the outcome, successful settlement, speaks to planning, cooperation, and resilience. On a global level, the oceans were changing too. Monsoon winds blew steadily, shaping currents. Glaciers far to the north locked away water, lowering seas and exposing coasts. These planetary processes opened the way, but human ingenuity made the leap. Nature offered the possibility. People seized it. Picture again the voyage. The raft drifts east, the sun blazing overhead by day, stars spreading wide at night. Water is rationed carefully. Children sleep in the shade of palm leaves. Fish are caught with sharpened bone hooks, pulled from the waves. Each hour, the raft moves further from land, surrounded only by water. Yet in the minds of those aboard, memory of stories, signs, and past journeys keeps hope alive. Then, after long uncertainty, A dark line appears on the horizon. The mountains of Sahul. Relief spreads, and the raft glides toward a new world. Archaeologists emphasize that these crossings were not one-time events. To establish lasting populations, multiple voyages must have occurred. Groups needed to bring not only hunters but also women and children. They carried fire, tools, and cultural traditions. The scale of migration implies planning and persistence. It was not an accident. It was the beginning of humanity's maritime history. Another lesser-known discovery comes from genetics. Studies show that indigenous Australians and Papuans carry significant Denisovan ancestry. This means that before or during the crossings, humans interbred with Denisovans somewhere in Ireland, Southeast Asia. The legacy of those encounters was carried across the sea. In this way, the oceanic leap was not only geographic but also genetic, binding together different branches of the human family. On the planetary scale, the settlement of Sahul is profound. For the first time, humans colonize an entirely new continent by sea. Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania become home to one of the world's oldest continuous cultures. The achievement shows the capacity of Homo sapiens to innovate beyond the limits of land. Oceans, once barriers, now become bridges. By 65,000 years ago, rafts into the unknown had already succeeded. Families walked the shores of northern Australia. Fires burned in new landscapes. Rock shelters filled with tools and pigments. The human journey had crossed yet another threshold. The skills that carried them over those straits would never be forgotten. Thus the leap into Sahul was not only a passage of geography but a triumph of imagination. To build a raft, to push into waters with no certain end, is to trust in knowledge and possibility. Those early voyagers may never have known the scale of what they achieved, but in their courage, humanity's path across the world was secured. After days upon the sea, rafts drift eastward under sun and stars. The air smells of salt. The waves rise and fall in endless rhythm. Then, at last, a faint line appears on the horizon. Mountains shimmer in the distance, dark against the morning sky. For the first time, modern humans glimpse Sahul, the ancient continent that combines Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania into one vast landmass. Sahul is unlike any place they have known before. Its animals, plants, and landscapes are profoundly different from those of Africa or Asia. The continent has been separated by deep seas for millions of years, allowing evolution to take a unique course. To step ashore here is to enter an entirely new world, one filled with strange forms of life. The coastline of northern Australia in this period is broad and fertile, with sea levels far lower than today. Wide plains stretch where shallow seas now lie. Rivers meander across mudflats and floodplains, carrying fresh water to the coast. Mangroves and palm groves line the estuaries. The climate is tropical, with heavy rains during the wet season and dry winds during the rest of the year. For arriving humans, this environment offers both abundance and challenge. Archaeological evidence confirms their presence. At Majid Bebe in Arnhem Land, stone tools, hearths, and fragments of ochre have been found, dated to around 65,000 years ago. These are among the earliest traces of human life in Australia. The tools are finely made, showing careful craftsmanship. The ochre fragments suggest symbolic or artistic use. Fires burned here, tools were shaped, and pigments were ground. The arrival was not only survival, but settlement. One lesser-known detail comes from starch grains preserved on stone tools. At Majidbebe, these grains reveal that people were processing plants, roots and seeds for food. This indicates a wide diet, not just hunting, but also careful gathering and preparation. Even in their first foothold on Sahul, humans showed ingenuity in using many resources. Mysteries remain about the route of arrival. Did the first landfall occur in northern Australia or further north in New Guinea, with later spread southward? Genetic evidence suggests both regions were colonized early, but the precise order is uncertain. Archaeology in New Guinea is less complete, leaving open questions about which coast first welcomed humans. On the planetary scale, the crossing into Sahul represents a turning point. Humanity has now reached the last great continental landmass outside the Americas, from Africa to Asia, from islands to oceans, and now onto a new continent. The species has expanded across nearly half the globe. This achievement is inseparable from the climatic and geological forces that shaped it: lowered seas, steady winds, fertile coasts. Nature opened the possibility, but human persistence realized it. Imagine the first days on shore. Fires are lit on sandy beaches, smoke rising into the sky. Families gather fresh water from rivers, cook fish from lagoons, and rest after the long voyage. Children play at the edge of the surf, watching crabs scuttle across the sand. In the forests behind them, unfamiliar cries echo, the calls of birds never heard before. Kangaroos bound through grasslands. Large reptiles bask in the sun. The land is strange, but it is alive with possibility. Sahul's fauna is extraordinary. Giant marsupials roam the plains. Diprotodon, a massive wombat-like creature, grazes on shrubs. Giant kangaroos stand taller than any human. Flightless birds rival ostriches in size. Reptiles are immense too. Crocodiles stretch over 6 meters, and monitor lizards grow to great lengths. These animals belong to ecosystems utterly distinct from Africa's savannas or Asia's forests. Humans arriving here must quickly adapt their strategies for hunting and gathering. Archaeological traces suggest that fire became an important tool. Burning grasslands could drive animals into open ground and stimulate new plant growth. Some scientists argue that human burning began reshaping Australian landscapes soon after arrival. If so, this would mark one of the earliest examples of people deliberately altering ecosystems at continental scale. A lesser-known discovery from early Sahul sites is the presence of groundstone tools. Unlike the flake tools common elsewhere, these are stones shaped by grinding, often used for processing plants. They appear here earlier than in most parts of the world. This innovation hints that the first Australians were not simply replicating traditions from their past, but inventing new technologies suited to their new environment. Still, uncertainties remain. How quickly did humans spread after first landfall? Some evidence suggests rapid expansion, reaching southern Australia within a few thousand years. Others argue for slower movement, with groups settling gradually before dispersing. The answer may depend on climate, resources, and population size. The record is fragmentary, leaving room for debate. On the planetary scale, the spread into Sahul coincides with ongoing glacial cycles. Ice sheets expand far to the north, but here in the tropics, warmth prevails. Rainfall patterns shift, coastlines advance and retreat, and ecosystems respond. Humans enter this dynamic world as new agents of change. Their fires, tools, and movement across the land add to the forces reshaping it. Consider the scale of achievement. From Africa to Sahul is more than 10,000 kilometers, greater than the span from Lisbon to Beijing. This journey, made over tens of thousands of years, required adaptation to deserts, rivers, mountains, islands, and seas. The arrival in Sahul is the culmination of this long migration. Humanity has proven that no barrier, not climate, not geography, not ocean, is insurmountable. One unresolved question is whether the first voyagers saw Sahul from afar before deciding to cross. On clear days, the mountains of New Guinea might be visible from nearby islands, but northern Australia is harder to glimpse. Did they set out with land in sight, or did they sail toward memory and trust? We cannot know. What is certain is that their courage carried them across. Another lesser-known aspect is the role of currents and winds. Computer simulations show that launching from Timor at the right season would carry rafts naturally toward Australia. The ocean itself provided assistance. Yet skill was still required to know the right time to prepare food, to protect fire. The voyagers succeeded not through chance alone, but through knowledge. By 65,000 years ago, Sahul was no longer empty. Camps dotted the coasts, fires burned in shelters, and ochre stained stones with color. Humans had arrived, and with them, the long history of the world's oldest continuous cultures began. Thus, the first glimpses of Sahul became more than a vision of land. They became the start of a new chapter, one of adaptation to strange fauna, of invention in tools and fire, of settlement across a vast continent. The voyagers who once pushed rafts into the unknown now stood on firm ground at the threshold of a world that would be home for tens of thousands of years. The first landfall in Sahul leads travellers onto the coasts of northern Australia. Here, unfamiliar skies stretch above, and the sounds of new creatures fill the air. This is a tropical world, shaped by monsoons, tides, and ancient rivers. For those who have crossed the seas, this land represents both reward and challenge. They are no longer voyagers in search of shore. They are settlers in a new continent. Northern Australia in this period is not as it is today. With sea levels more than 100 meters lower, the coastline lies far beyond its modern line. Wide floodplains stretch outward, crossed by rivers that empty into bays and estuaries. Mangroves, palms, and open woodlands cover the land. Monsoon rains arrive each year, filling lagoons and wetlands. Then the dry season follows, with sun-scorched grass and shrinking waterholes. This rhythm of wet and dry defines life here, just as the monsoon had guided movements in South Asia. Archaeological sites preserve traces of these first arrivals. Majid Bebe in Arnhem Land is one of the most significant. Here, stone tools, grinding stones, and fragments of ochre date to around 65,000 years ago. These finds confirm that people lived here soon after arriving. The tools are finely made, blades carefully struck from stone, ochre ground to powder, hints at painting or symbolic expression. Grinding stones reveal the processing of plants. The site shows that life was organized, creative, and adaptive. A lesser-known detail from Majid Bebe is the discovery of hafted tools, stone flakes attached to wooden handles using resin. This technology is among the earliest evidence of complex tool construction in the world. It demonstrates foresight and skill, selecting the right stone, preparing adhesive from plant resins, shaping wood for a handle. The combination produces a versatile tool, far more effective than stone alone. Such innovation marks the beginning of new cultural traditions in Sahul. Mysteries remain about the pace of settlement. Did humans spread quickly along the coasts, occupying vast areas within a few thousand years, or did they remain localized at first, adapting slowly before expanding? Archaeological evidence is scattered, leaving room for debate. Some sites in Western and Southern Australia suggest early dates, but confirmation is difficult. What is clear is that Northern Australia served as the first foothold, the foundation for later dispersal. On the planetary scale, these events unfold during a time of global climatic instability. Glaciers expand and contract in the Northern Hemisphere. Winds shift across oceans. In Australia, rainfall varies sharply from century to century. Sometimes the monsoon is strong, feeding rivers and forests. At other times, droughts dominate, forcing groups to adapt or move. Human survival depends on flexibility, a trait that defines Homo sapiens across continents. Imagine the daily rhythm of life along the floodplains. At dawn, hunters move through tall grasses, watching for kangaroos or emus. Women gather tubers and seeds, using grinding stones to prepare food. Children collect shellfish along muddy banks. Fires are lit in small clearings, smoke rising into the sky. At night, stories may be told around the firelight, though no words survive to us. The landscape provides, but it also demands constant attention. Crocodiles lurk in rivers. Snakes slide through grass. Storms roll in with sudden force. Life is secure only through knowledge and cooperation. The fauna of Sahul is remarkable. Enormous marsupials dominate the land. Diprotodon, the giant wombat-like grazer, Procoptodon, a short-faced kangaroo taller than any human, giant, flightless birds heavier than ostriches. Reptiles are immense as well, including crocodiles that stretch longer than rafts. For the newcomers, these animals represent both danger and opportunity. Some are hunted, others avoided. Over time, humans learn which are edible, which are threatening, and which can be tracked across open plains. A lesser-known discovery from sites in Northern Australia is the use of plant fibers for making cords and baskets. Impressions in clay and residues on tools suggest weaving and binding. Such practices reveal the careful use of local vegetation, expanding the range of resources. Fibers allow for nets, traps, and containers. Small technologies that make survival easier. Still, unanswered questions linger. Did humans encounter giant marsupials immediately? Or had some species already declined by the time of their arrival? Some evidence suggests rapid extinctions, possibly linked to human hunting or fire use. Others argue that climate shifts played a larger role. The balance of causes is still debated. What is certain is that within a few thousand years, many of these great animals vanished, leaving behind only bones and legends. On the planetary scale, their disappearance echoes similar events elsewhere. In the Americas, giant mammals will vanish after human arrival. In Europe, mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses will decline as climates warm. Australia's extinctions are part of this broader pattern of human interaction with ecosystems, reshaping landscapes across the globe. Consider again the achievement of arrival. From distant Africa, across deserts, rivers, monsoons, and seas, humans now stand on the soil of Australia. The distance covered is immense, more than 10,000 kilometers. Yet the journey is complete. Fires burn in Arnhem Land. Footprints mark sandy shores, and ochre stains stone. The human story now belongs to this continent too. Another lesser-known clue lies in the use of shelters. Rock overhangs and caves in northern Australia contain early traces of occupation. Hearths, stone flakes, and pigment show that these places served as gathering points, safe from storms and sun. The rock shelters also preserve some of the oldest art traditions in the world, though most are younger than the earliest settlement. Still, their presence speaks to the importance of place, memory, and continuity. Mysteries also surround the cultural practices of these first Australians. Did they sing, carve, or paint? Did they develop rituals for arrival, for hunting, for remembering ancestors? The archaeological record is silent on such questions, but later traditions of Aboriginal Australia suggest deep continuity. Story, song, and connection to land are ancient, perhaps stretching back to these very first arrivals. On the planetary scale, Australia represents a new kind of human challenge. The continent is isolated by oceans, its flora and fauna unique. No large domesticated animals will emerge here, no great herds like those of Eurasia. Instead, humans adapt to marsupials, birds, reptiles, and plants unlike any elsewhere. Their success demonstrates the extraordinary flexibility of Homo sapiens, the ability to make a home anywhere on Earth. By 65,000 years ago, northern Australia is alive with human presence. Camps cluster along rivers, grinding stones prepare seeds, hafted tools cut wood and hide. Fires burn across floodplains, reshaping grasslands. The land is no longer untouched. It has become part of the human world. Thus, the arrival in northern Australia is more than a landing. It is the beginning of settlement, adaptation, and transformation. From this first foothold, humans will spread across the continent, reaching deserts, mountains, and coasts. But here, in Arnhem Land, the story begins. Fire on the floodplain, ochre on stone, and life unfolding in a new world. From the tropical coasts of northern Australia, human groups begin to move inland. Rivers guide their steps, winding across floodplains and vanishing into drier country. These waterways are lifelines. They carry fresh water, fish, and birds. They cut through stone ridges and open pathways into the vast interior. For early Australians, following rivers is the natural way to explore this immense land. The continent they enter is unlike any they have known before. Much of its centre is arid, marked by deserts and salt lakes, yet hidden within are networks of rivers and ancient channels, many flowing only seasonally. During wet period, they swell into wide streams. In dry years, they shrink to chains of waterholes. The rhythm of flood and drought governs life in the interior, shaping where humans can travel and when they must move on. Archaeological evidence confirms that people penetrated these inland regions early. Sites along the Willandra Lakes in New South Wales preserve hearths, stone tools, and human burials more than 40,000 years old. The lakes themselves are now dry, but in the Ice Age they held fresh water, fed by rivers running from the highlands. People camped along their shores, hunted waterfowl, and gathered shellfish. When the lakes dried, groups shifted again, following rivers to new refuges. A lesser-known detail comes from pollen and charcoal preserved in lake sediments. These records show that humans burned vegetation along rivers and lake shores, perhaps to open grasslands for hunting. Such burning altered ecosystems, favoring certain plants and animals. Even in the early millennia of occupation, people were already shaping the interior landscapes. Fire was not only a tool for warmth and cooking, but also for managing land. Mysteries remain about how quickly people moved through the interior. Some researchers argue that rivers acted as expressways, allowing rapid dispersal. Within a few thousand years, humans may have crossed the continent from north to south. Others suggest slower movement, with groups settling near rivers for long periods before expanding further. The truth may lie between bursts of rapid spread when climate was favorable, followed by periods of local settlement during drought. On the planetary scale, Australia in this period is shaped by the Ice Age climate. Glaciers far to the north lower sea levels, but here in the southern hemisphere, the main effect is rainfall fluctuation. Wet phases bring flowing rivers and green grass. Dry phases turn valleys to dust and force groups into refuges. These cycles may last centuries, demanding patience and adaptation. Human presence expands and contracts in rhythm with the earth. Imagine a journey along the Daly River in the top end. At dawn, families walk its banks, gathering shellfish and catching fish with spears. Children play in the shallows, leaving footprints in mud. Hunters follow animal tracks to waterholes, where kangaroos and emus come to drink. Fires burn in the evening, lighting stone tools as they are flaked into new shapes. When rains come, the river floods, spreading fresh soil and attracting waterbirds. When drought arrives, only deep pools remain, guarded carefully as life-giving sources. The fauna of the interior is striking. In wetter times, giant marsupials move along river corridors. Diprotodon grazes on shrubs near water. Genyornis, a massive flightless bird, lays eggs on sandy banks. Megalania, a giant monitor lizard, lurks in dry grass. Humans hunt some of these creatures, avoid others, and gradually learn their patterns. Evidence from burned eggshells of Genyornis suggests people collected and cooked them, perhaps contributing to the bird's eventual extinction. A lesser-known discovery from river valleys is the presence of grindstones used for seed processing, dated to more than 40,000 years ago. These are among the earliest such tools in the world. They show that people were already experimenting with plant foods in systematic ways, turning wild seeds into flour or paste. This innovation hints at long-term adaptation to arid environments, where plant resources were vital. Still, uncertainties remain. Did people move only along major rivers, or did they also cross deserts directly, carrying water in skins or wooden containers? Archaeology is sparse in many interior regions, leaving gaps. But the consistent presence of stone tools along rivers supports the view that waterways were central to exploration. Rivers were both guides and anchors in the vast inland. On the planetary scale, rivers connect interior Australia to the coasts. The Murray-Darling system, stretching thousands of kilometres, links southeastern highlands to southern plains. During wetter phases, it carries abundant water, supporting large populations. During droughts, it dwindles, leaving only pools. The ebb and flow of these great rivers may have influenced patterns of human movement, trade, and gathering for tens of millennia. Consider the scale of exploration. From Arnhem Land in the north to the Willandra Lakes in the south is more than 2,000 kilometres, greater than the distance from Rome to Stockholm. Yet within a few thousand years, humans achieved it. Each step was guided by rivers, each camp sustained by waterholes, each journey marked by fire and stone. Another lesser-known detail comes from human burials at Lake Mungo, part of the Willandra system. These remains, dated to over 40,000 years ago, show deliberate burial practices, including the use of ochre. This is among the earliest evidence of ritual in Australia. It reveals that rivers and lakes were not only places of survival, but also of meaning. Water, life, and memory were linked. Mysteries also surround the role of climate change in shaping megafaunal extinctions. Did human hunting along rivers cause the disappearance of Diprotodon and other giants, or did shifts in rainfall stress these species before humans arrived? The debate continues, but evidence of human interaction with cut marks on bone, burned eggshells, suggests people played a part. The rivers, once shared with giants, soon held only smaller animals. On the planetary scale, such extinctions mirror events in other continents. Wherever humans spread, large animals declined. In Australia, the process may have been accelerated by the fragile ecosystems of arid zones. Once disturbed, they could not recover. The rivers carried not only water, but also change, as humans reshaped the balance of life. By 40 to 50,000 years ago, humans were well established in the interior. Camps dotted river valleys, grinding stones processed seeds, and burials marked the presence of memory. The rivers had become threads of human life, binding coast to desert. Though many have since dried, their legacy endures in the archaeological record and in the landscapes they once fed. Thus, the rivers of the ancient interior were more than geographic features. They were guides, refugia, and symbols. They carried people across a vast, harsh continent, sustained life in times of drought, and witnessed the meeting of humanity with Australia's giant creatures. Following rivers, humans claimed the heart of a new land, adapting once again to the rhythms of Earth. Across the rivers and floodplains of Sahul, humans discover that fire is not only a tool for warmth and cooking, but also a force for shaping the world around them. Fire becomes part of the landscape itself, applied with intention, repeated across seasons, and remembered across generations. In northern Australia, in the deserts, and in the forests, people begin to burn the land carefully, selectively, to create new patterns of life. This practice will come to define the relationship between humans and the continent. Australia is highly sensitive to fire. Many of its plants evolved with flame long before humans arrived. Eucalypts and acacias thrive when fire clears competing vegetation. Some seeds germinate only after heat or smoke. Grasses recover quickly when burned, sprouting fresh green shoots. For animals, these cycles open feeding grounds and attract herbivores. For humans, fire becomes a way to manage abundance, to predict food sources, and to shape ecosystems to their advantage. Archaeological evidence supports this deep use of fire. Layers of charcoal appear in sediments across the continent, marking times when burning became more frequent. At Lake Mungo and other inland sites, increases in charcoal coincide with human occupation. This suggests that fire was not only accidental, but deliberate. By 60,000 years ago, people were already altering landscapes through controlled burning. A lesser-known detail comes from analysis of grass pollen in ancient sediments. In many regions, pollen records shift dramatically after human arrival, from shrubs and trees to grasses. This transformation points to repeated burning, which clears woody vegetation and promotes grasslands. Such changes are too rapid to be explained by climate alone. Human fire made the difference. Still, mysteries remain. How organized were these early burns? Were they coordinated across group, or simply small fires lit for local needs? Ethnographic records from later Aboriginal traditions describe highly sophisticated fire regimes, with different seasons and purposes for burning. to hunt animals, to encourage certain plants, to clear paths. Whether such complexity was present 60,000 years ago is unknown, but the ecological signals suggest that fire was already more than incidental. On the planetary scale, the use of fire to shape landscapes is one of humanity's most profound impacts. In Africa, Europe, and Asia, people used fire to clear forests, manage grasslands, and drive game. But in Australia, the impact is especially striking. The continent's isolation and unique flora made it highly responsive. With each burn, humans became agents of ecological transformation. Imagine a scene on the savannah near Arnhem Land. The wet season has ended. Grasses are tall and dry. A small group gathers, carrying smouldering sticks from the campfire. They move slowly across the plain, dropping sparks in patches. Flames rise, low and controlled, sweeping quickly through the grass. Birds circle overhead, catching insects flushed from the fire. Kangaroos hop toward fresh shoots that will sprout after the burn. Within weeks, the plain is green again, rich with food. Fire has turned scarcity into abundance. The megafauna of Sahul also feel the impact. Diprotodon and other large grazers once roamed widely, feeding on shrubs and trees. As grasslands spread through human burning, their habitats shrink. Combined with hunting and climate stress, this contributes to their decline. Burned eggshells of Genyornis, the giant bird, suggest people used fire to cook and eat their eggs. Fire is both tool and weapon, reshaping the balance between species. A lesser-known discovery comes from cave art and oral traditions. Some Aboriginal rock paintings, though much younger, depict fire scenes. Hunting with flames, landscapes alight. Oral traditions also remember fire as a gift, a force tied to ancestors. Though these records cannot be traced directly to 65,000 years ago, they reflect the deep antiquity of fire knowledge in Australia. Still, uncertainties remain. Did humans intend large-scale ecological change, or were the effects unplanned outcomes of local burning? Some scientists argue that people may have sought only immediate benefits, easier hunting, fresh growth. The continental transformation may have been an unintended consequence. Others suggest that the practice was already deliberate and widespread. The answer may never be clear. What is certain is that by 40 to 50,000 years ago, much of Australia bore the marks of human fire. On the planetary scale, such burning altered not only ecosystems but also the atmosphere. Charcoal in sediments records not just local fires but regional ones. In some models, human fire use in Australia may have influenced global carbon cycles slightly, part of the long interaction between people and planet, even if small. It is a reminder that humanity's reach extends beyond immediate surroundings. Consider again the daily life of these early Australians. Fire warms their shelters, cooks their food, and protects against predators, but it also shapes their journeys. Burning clears paths through dense vegetation, making travel easier. Fires lit along riversides attract animals, providing hunting opportunities. Smoke signals may mark camps or carry messages. Fire becomes woven into every activity, as constant as stone tools or waterhole. Another lesser-known piece of evidence comes from termite mounds. In some burned regions, ancient mounds preserve changes in soil chemistry caused by repeated fires. These subtle traces confirm that humans maintained burning over long spans of time. Such consistency suggests knowledge passed between generations, memory of when and where to burn. Mysteries also surround the connection between fire and social life. Did groups coordinate burns to share benefits or compete over territories? Did fire play a role in ceremony or identity? Archaeology offers little direct evidence, but later traditions indicate that fire was more than practical. It was cultural, tied to knowledge of land, time, and ancestors. The origins of such traditions may stretch back to these early millennia. On the planetary scale, Australia's fire history stands as one of the earliest examples of humans acting as ecosystem engineers. Unlike hunting, which removes animals, or gathering, which takes plants, burning changes the very structure of habitats. Once begun, such practices ripple outward, influencing soil, water, animals, and climate. By 40 to 50,000 years ago, humans had spread across much of Australia. Fire was with them everywhere, in deserts, on coasts, in forests. Each landscape bore its mark. Grasses expanded, forests retreated, animals shifted. Fire had become a permanent presence in the continent's ecology. Thus, the arrival of humans brought more than tools and footprints. It brought flame. In the hands of people, fire was transformed from a natural hazard into an instrument of survival and meaning. With each burn, they shaped the land to their needs, and with each burn, they inscribed themselves more deeply into the story of Australia. In northern Australia, stone escarpments rise above floodplains and forests. Within their folds lie caves and overhangs, places of shade and refuge. These are the rock shelters of Arnhem Land, among the most enduring homes of early Australians. For tens of thousands of years, people returned to them, lighting fires, leaving tools, and marking walls with pigment. In these places, traces of the first Australians remain visible, linking present to deep past. The shelters are formed of sandstone, eroded by rain and wind into cliffs, ridges, and caves. They provide dry ground in wet seasons, cool shade in the heat, and safe vantage points above surrounding plains. Waterholes often lie nearby, fed by streams that trickle through stone. For small bands of humans, these are ideal living spaces. They protect from storms, offer wide views of the land, and preserve the remains of daily life. Majid Bebe, one of the most famous sites, lies at the base of an escarpment in Arnhem Land. Excavations here reveal a sequence of human occupation stretching back 65,000 years. Layers of hearths, stone tools, and pigments accumulate over millennia. Archaeologists find thousands of stone flakes, grinding stones, and fragments of ochre. Each layer tells of repeated visits, generation after generation, as people used the shelter for work, rest, and ceremony. A lesser-known detail is the discovery of small stone points that may have been used as spear tips. These are among the earliest examples of projectile technology in the world, hafted onto wooden shafts with resin. They show advanced planning and craftsmanship. Such tools allowed more effective hunting of animals in forests and floodplains. Their presence at Majid Bebe demonstrates innovation from the earliest days of Australian settlement. Still, mysteries surround the exact nature of life in these shelters. Were they year-round homes or seasonal camps used when rains flooded the plains? The evidence suggests both. Ash layers indicate repeated fires, while plant remains show varied diets, so the shelters may have served as hubs, used regularly but not exclusively. People likely moved between floodplains, forests, and shelters according to season, carrying fire and memory with them. On the planetary scale, the rock shelters represent a new stage of human adaptation. Unlike temporary open-air camps, they endure. Their protection from rain and sun allows tools, pigments, and art to survive for tens of millennia. This preservation offers a unique window into deep time. Few other places in the world preserve such continuous records of human presence. Imagine a scene inside Masjid Bebe 65,000 years ago. The floor is lit by a small fire. A group sits in the glow, shaping stone blades from quartzite brought from nearby outcrops. Children play at the edges, tracing shapes in sand. Someone grinds seeds on a flat stone, producing flour for a meal. In another corner, pigment is ground from ochre, red dust staining hands. The smell of smoke and earth fills the space. Outside, cicadas buzz, and the wetlands shimmer in moonlight. The shelter holds not only people but their world. The art of Arnhem Land deepens the picture. Though many surviving paintings are younger than the earliest occupation, they suggest that symbolic expression was part of life from the beginning. Rock walls bear stencils of hands, silhouettes of animals, and abstract designs. Some paintings show fish, kangaroos, and turtles, reflecting the environment. Others depict human figures in ceremonial poses. These images connect generations, marking the shelters as places of memory and identity. A lesser-known discovery from pigment analysis shows that different sources of ochre were used, some carried from distant locations. This suggests travel or exchange networks. Ochre was not only functional but valued, part of cultural practice. Carrying pigment into shelters shows deliberate intent to mark space, to create meaning on stone surfaces. Still, questions remain about the continuity of occupation. Did people live here steadily for 65,000 years? Or were there gaps during harsh climates? Sediment layers show fluctuations, with some periods more heavily used than others. Droughts or changing rivers may have caused temporary abandonment. Yet overall, the record is astonishingly long. Few other sites in the world show such depth of time. On the planetary scale, the rock shelters highlight how humans transform landscapes into cultural places. A cave is more than stone. It becomes a home, a canvas, a store of memory. As glaciers expand in the north and seas rise and fall, the shelters of Arnhem Land continue to witness human presence. They are fixed anchors in a shifting world. Consider the technological advances preserved here: grinding stones for seeds and pigments, hafted points, and edge-ground axes appear early. Edge-ground axes are especially notable, among the earliest in the world. They represent innovation unique to Australia, tools suited for cutting wood in forests. These inventions show that people were not simply copying traditions from elsewhere, but developing their own. Another lesser-known aspect is the presence of food remains, shells, bones, and plant residues. These reveal diverse diets, including fish, turtles, wallabies, and yams. The shelters acted as storage of food knowledge, teaching each generation what could be eaten and how. Over time, this knowledge became part of cultural tradition, passed along with stories and art. Mysteries remain about the meanings of the earliest art. Were hand stencils marks of identity, symbols of belonging, or simple play? Did animal figures carry ritual significance? Without direct testimony, we can only guess. Yet the persistence of art across tens of thousands of years suggests it held deep meaning. The shelters were not only practical refuges, but sacred places of expression. On the planetary scale, the shelters of Arnhem Land stand as one of the oldest continuous cultural landscapes on Earth. They remind us that human history is not only about movement, but about return, generation after generation. People came back to the same stones, lit fires in the same corners, and added layers of meaning to the same walls. Few other places can claim such constancy. By 65,000 years ago, humans in Arnhem Land had already mastered this way of life. They built fires in shelters, ground seeds into flour, painted walls with ochre, and shaped tools of stone and wood. Their presence was not temporary but enduring. The shelters became part of the human story, binding land, people, and memory into one. Thus, the rock shelters of Arnhem Land are more than archaeological sites. They are windows into deep time where tools, pigments, and art survive as voices of the past. They show how early Australians created homes, expressed meaning, and adapted to their land. In these shelters, the story of humanity's arrival in Sahul becomes visible, carved into stone and carried forward across millennia. Across the continent of Sahul, landscapes fill with memory. Rivers, hills, and stones are not only physical features, but places linked to stories. Over time, these stories weave into networks of meaning that later traditions call the dreaming. The beginnings of these pathways may already be forming in the deep past, as humans mark land with travel, fire, art, and memory. Section by section, generation by generation, connections between people and place grow. The land of Australia is vast, from northern tropics to southern deserts, from coastal estuaries to inland plains. Distances stretch for hundreds and even thousands of kilometers. For small groups of humans, survival requires movement. Yet movement is never random. Paths form between waterholes, rock shelters, hunting grounds, and gathering sites. Over time, these paths are remembered. Each bend of river, each prominent hill, becomes a marker in the human mind. Archaeological evidence reveals long-distance connections from early times. Stone materials found in shelters sometimes originate far from where they were used. At sites in Arnhem Land, pieces of stone come from quarries dozens of kilometers away. This implies not only travel but knowledge of sources, routes, and exchanges. Shell beads appear inland, carried from distant coasts. These traces suggest that networks of movement and exchange stretch across landscapes even in the earliest millennia. A lesser-known detail comes from pigment analysis. Ochre used in rock art often comes from sources located far from the shelter walls. Carrying pigment across distances shows both planning and significance. Certain colors may have held special meaning, tied to particular places. The journey of ochre from quarry to shelter was not simply practical, but symbolic, linking landscapes together. Still, mysteries surround how these paths of memory first formed. Were they organized into shared systems across groups, or were they local traditions that gradually linked together? Archaeology shows movement, but not the stories that accompanied it. Later, Aboriginal traditions describe songlines, paths across the land traced by ancestral beings, sung and remembered by people. Whether such systems existed 60,000 years ago cannot be proven, yet the seeds of such memory, carried in travel, fire, and art, must already have been present. On the planetary scale, this represents a transformation in how humans relate to land. In earlier migrations across Africa and Eurasia, people moved through unfamiliar landscapes. But in Sahul, once settled, people begin to map the land with memory. Paths become not only routes of survival, but frameworks of meaning. The continent itself becomes a vast archive, inscribed with story. Imagine a journey across Arnhem Land. A group moves from a rock shelter toward a floodplain. Along the way, they stop at a prominent boulder, pausing to retell how ancestors once rested there. Further along, a bend in the river is linked to a memory of fire or a successful hunt. Each feature anchors experience, giving shape to the path. By repeating stories at the same places, people bind memory to land. Another lesser-known finding comes from residue analysis on grinding stones. Some stones bear traces of plants not local to the site, implying that food was carried across distances. This supports the idea of seasonal journeys, where people traveled to gather resources and brought them back. Such movements reinforced knowledge of routes, water sources, and landmarks. The act of carrying food itself tied places together. Still, much remains uncertain. How far did early groups travel within a year? Did paths extend hundreds of kilometers, or were they shorter circuits linked over generations? Some scientists argue for relatively small ranges, others for extensive mobility. The truth may lie between, with local ranges connected by long-term exchanges. What is clear is that movement was constant, and memory followed movement. On the planetary scale, such mapping of land through story is a hallmark of human culture. It transforms survival strategies into traditions. Just as stars guide navigation across oceans, landmarks guide memory across continents. In Australia, this process becomes especially deep because of the continent's vastness and diversity. Each group adapts to its terrain, yet also connects across boundaries. Consider the role of fire in shaping these paths. Burning not only altered ecosystems but also created visible traces. A burned plain left behind ash, regrowth, and animal tracks. These signs guided hunters and travelers, marking times and places. Over years, fire became a cyclical marker, tying movement to season. The memory of fire, like the memory of stone or water, became part of the path. A lesser-known piece of evidence comes from genetic studies. Analyses of Aboriginal populations reveal deep regional diversity, with groups rooted in particular landscapes for tens of millennia. This suggests that once people settled regions, they remained connected to them. Such continuity implies that stories, songs, and paths bound people to land in enduring ways. Even as groups interacted, each territory carried its own identity. Yet mysteries persist. Did early symbolic systems resemble later dreaming traditions, or were they simpler frameworks of memory? Archaeology cannot resolve this. What is certain is that humans everywhere create meaning from place, and in Sahul, this process reached remarkable depth. The continuity of later traditions suggests that early roots were already in place. On the planetary scale, these beginnings of dreaming paths show humanity's unique ability to layer story onto landscape. Where animals follow instinctive routes, humans add memory, meaning, and ritual. A rock is not only stone but a marker of identity. A river bend is not only water, but a site of origin. Through such layering, land becomes culture. By 40 to 50,000 years ago, much of Australia was already mapped in human minds. Rock shelters, rivers, plains, and coasts formed a web of memory. Paths linked them, carried by movement, fire, pigment, and story. People did not merely live on the land, they lived within a network of meaning. These early dreaming paths, though invisible to archaeology, are felt in the continuity of culture that endures today. Thus, the first Australians transformed a vast and challenging continent into a living map. Each journey was both practical and symbolic. binding people to place. The beginnings of the dreaming can be traced here, in the paths, the pigments, the stories that turned land into memory. In these ancient journeys, the continent itself became a song, sung across generations. On the northern coasts of Sahul, the sea breaks against mangroves and sandy bars. Waves roll in from the Arafura Sea, carrying driftwood and shells. Beyond the surf lies the wider world of islands and seas. But here, for the first time, modern humans have reached the new continent of Australia. Their arrival marks the completion of one of the greatest migrations in human prehistory. From Africa, across Asia, through Wallacea, and over open water, they have crossed into a land unlike any they have known. The shoreline they encounter is not the same as today. With ice locked in northern glaciers, sea levels are lower. Much of the continental shelf is exposed, joining New Guinea, Australia, and Tasmania into a single landmass called Sahul. What we know as islands and straits are then broad plains, rivers, and shallow seas. The coastlines extend far outward, creating fertile zones rich in food. For the newcomers, these shores offer both challenges and abundance. Archaeological evidence places their arrival at least 65,000 years ago. Sites like Masjid Bebe in Arnhem Land preserve layers of stone tools and pigments dating back to this time. The precision of dating methods has been debated. Yet the consensus remains: humans entered Sahul earlier than once thought. Their presence coincides with profound environmental shifts and with the disappearance of some of the world's largest animals. A lesser-known detail comes from shell middens found along ancient shorelines. Piles of discarded shells show that early groups harvested mollusks in large quantities. These middens are among the earliest coastal food remains in Australia, demonstrating that people quickly adapted to marine environments. They knew how to collect, cook, and share shellfish, supplementing diets of land animals and plants. Still, mysteries surround the crossing itself. Was it a single migration or multiple waves? Did people arrive by chance, blown off course, or by deliberate voyaging? The distances involved, though shorter with lower seas, still required sea crossings of more than 70 kilometers. Many researchers argue that such journeys could not have been accidental. Intentional voyaging, using rafts or simple boats, seems the most likely explanation. Yet the exact form of these craft remains unknown. On the planetary scale, but this migration highlights humanity's ability to cross ecological frontiers. Few other animals deliberately sail across seas to settle new continents. In doing so, early humans expanded the known world, occupying environments from equatorial forests to dry deserts, from icy steppes to tropical coasts. Sahul stands as one of the furthest reaches of this expansion. Imagine the first landing. A raft or canoe touches the sand. People step ashore, carrying fire, tools, and memory. Behind them lies the chain of islands they have crossed. Before them stretches a vast continent filled with unknown creatures, rivers, and plains. The footprints they leave on the damp sand are the beginning of a new chapter in human history. Within a few generations, groups spread inland, following rivers into forests and grasslands. Another lesser-known trace comes from the use of stone axe fragments found in early layers. These axes are among the oldest edge-ground axes in the world, developed in Australia earlier than anywhere else. Their innovation shows adaptation to forest environments, where cutting wood for shelters, digging tools, or firewood was essential. The technology suggests that from the first millennia, people were not simply surviving, but actively reshaping landscapes. Still, Questions remain about the impact of these first settlers on the megafauna of Sahul. Giant marsupials, enormous reptiles, and flightless birds roamed the land. Within several thousand years of human arrival, many of these species vanish. Was hunting the cause, or did climate shifts play the larger role? Most scholars suggest a combination. Human use of fire, hunting pressures, and changing rainfall together transformed ecosystems. Yet no single factor fully explains the rapid extinctions. On the planetary scale, such extinctions echo elsewhere. In the Americas, later human arrivals coincide with the loss of mammoths and giant sloths. In Sahul, the disappearance of giant kangaroos and marsupial lions signals similar patterns. Wherever humans go, ecosystems change. This reflects both human adaptability and the fragility of large animals facing new pressures. Beyond survival, the first Australians began shaping cultural traditions that endure. Rock art, pigments, grinding stones, and shelters mark their presence. Over tens of millennia, these practices evolve into one of the longest continuous cultural heritages on Earth. The stories, ceremonies, and dreaming paths of later Aboriginal traditions may find their earliest roots in these first steps. The continent itself becomes a canvas, layered with memory. Consider the planetary implications of this continuity. While glaciers advance and retreat in the Northern Hemisphere, while deserts expand and contract in Africa, the people of Sahul remain. Populations adapt to shifting coastlines, rising seas, and changing climates. Yet the link between people and land endures. From the first footsteps on the shore to modern traditions, the connection spans 65,000 years. Few other places in the world hold such unbroken threads of human presence. Another lesser-known discovery comes from microscopic analysis of stone tools. Residues of plants suggest that tubers, grasses, and fruits were processed very early. This indicates broad diets and deep ecological knowledge. People understood local plants quickly, learning what to eat, how to cook, and how to store. Such knowledge was critical for survival and became part of oral traditions that tied groups to their territories. Still, mysteries surround how many people arrived in the earliest waves. Genetic studies suggest that the founding population was large enough to ensure long-term survival. Estimates range from several hundred to a few thousand individuals. Such numbers imply organized migrations, not isolated landings. If true, this shows a remarkable capacity for planning, cooperation, and navigation tens of millennia before written history. On the planetary scale, this migration into Sahul is part of humanity's broader journey across Earth. From a species confined to Africa, humans spread to every continent except Antarctica by 40,000 years ago. The landing on Sahul shores is one of the earliest and most remarkable milestones in this expansion. It demonstrates that humans are not limited by familiar landscapes. Oceans, deserts, and forests all become part of their domain. By 65,000 years ago, the new continent of Sahul has its first human inhabitants. They live in shelters, hunt across plains, gather shellfish from coasts, and leave pigments on stone walls. Their presence changes ecosystems, shaping the future of Australia. The footsteps they leave on ancient shores mark not only arrival, but endurance. From this moment, human history in Sahul begins, a story that continues unbroken to this day. Far back in time, on shores now hidden by rising seas, the first footsteps of modern humans touched Sahul. From that moment onward, the continent held a continuous human story, one of the longest on Earth. over 65,000 years. People walked rivers, crossed deserts, and lit fires beneath unfamiliar skies. Landscapes changed, animals vanished, seas advanced and withdrew. Yet through all shifts, the presence of people endured. Archaeology reveals fragments, stone tools buried in sand, pigments brushed on rock, shells piled near forgotten coasts. Each fragment is a trace, faint but enduring. Together, they form a quiet record of lives lived across vast spans of time. Still, so much remains unknown. How journeys were planned, how stories were first sung, how meanings grew around stone and river. These mysteries linger, just beyond reach. On the planetary scale, the settlement of Sahul reflects humanity's wider journey. From Africa to the farthest coasts, our species carried fire, memory, and adaptability. Each migration was both a risk and a promise. In crossing seas, in mapping new lands with story, humans became a truly global species. The first footsteps on Australia's shores were part of this wider unfolding, a chapter still written into living traditions today. As the night quiets, what endures is not only the record of tools and art, but the deep continuity of presence. For tens of millennia, people and land have remained bound together, each shaping the other. The first landing did not end in silence. It began a song carried forward across generations, still alive in memory and tradition. And so the story rests, stretching from ancient shores into the present and onward into time yet to come.